Hello, how's it going?
It is going quite well. It is a beautiful, sunny day here in Missouri, and I went running this morning, and there were like birds chirping, and it was just the first time I run when it feels like spring weather is one of my favorite moments of the year.
Hmm,
And this was that day.
that is fantastic. I love
Yeah.
that feeling.
Oh, it's so good. But so anyway, that just gave me a great outlook on the entire day. How's your day going?
My day is quite good. I realized that one of the things that I really need to keep balance in my life is time to sit and read.
Hmm.
I have not had a lot of that recently, and the last 2 days, I have legitimately had time to sit and read. And I tell you what, it just does something for my brain, my soul, my nervous system. I don't know, all of it. So I feel good. I've been reading
It's awesome. Have you been reading the book I think you have been reading?
the Book of Mormon.
Well, I assume you read that on a daily basis. Um, but no, the I forget the name of it, but the book from my one of my
Oh,
seminary books.
yeah, the Psychology of Christian Character Formation.
Yes.
Yes, that is one of the books I have been reading, and I am enjoying it.
Ooh. I am so excited. That is going to have to be a future conversation when you finish it because I found the angle that she was coming from just fascinating.
Well, I'm only a chapter in, and I already find it fascinating. And I kind of wonder if it's going to set us up for like 15 conversations, but we'll see.
It really good. It really good. But that actually leads me into what I want to talk about today.
All right.
We talk about some pretty serious, practical, and heavy theological topics. That's kind of the space where we live is where does theology and following Jesus and everyday life, where do the intersection of those things as friends? And I realized this week we have missed some very important questions that really hit the intersection of those realities.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So I've got a list of these. I don't know that some of these may be just so central to Christian orthodoxy that we may not have a very long conversation about them. So I've got a bunch of them and we'll see how many we get through. But I just feel like we need to do a grab bag of important theological discussions today.
Okay. All right. I guess hit me.
All right, here we go. The first one, I think this is something that hits really some of the fundamental things that we were taught as evangelicals growing up in the church. I think maybe we should start with the obvious question. Do you think that Moses actually had a beard?
Okay. So clearly, all of your lead up was just silliness. Um, wow. Does Moses have a beard? Okay. Yes. Of course he has a beard, right? Like we've all seen Charleston Heston and the Ten Commandments. Like he has a beard. Like, but I'll tell you even more than that. My daughter, like, so when I don't know how old I was. I just remember how old she was. She was like 3 years old, and I shaved my goatee for the first time. And honestly, the only time. I've never done it since. I shaved my goatee, and she took one look at me and just started laughing. She thought I looked ridiculous. And it's one of those family stories that we tell over and over and over again, because for like 3 days, she wouldn't stop laughing at me. It was the most ridicule you could get out of a child. It was absurd. And I think the same thing would be true of Moses. Like A baby-faced Moses? No, that would be absurd. We would just laugh at that. So yes, he has a beard. Anybody that disagrees with me is just dead wrong.
So this is the problem I have in life is when I hear questions like this, I'm like, I wonder if there's any actual like biblical or archaeological or cultural like
You take
stuff
the
that we
question
need to know
seriously.
about. So I I may have done a little bit of research.
Oh gosh.
Um, and there are clearly Jewish Israelite culture at the time. Beards were a big deal. Very quickly, we get into the proscriptions by God that prophets can't cut their beards. And so there's a very good chance Moses was in that category. However, the thing that I thought was fascinating from a kind of visually is that Moses grew up as an Egyptian, right? And Egyptians actually often were actually clean shaven with almost drawn on beards or stylized beards. So for the first like 40 years of his life, that's what Moses grew up around. And I just thought to myself, huh, imagine if Moses had like the Egyptian leadership beard that was some odd combination of very finely manscaped facial hair and eyeshadow.
Wow. Um, yeah. I think that's even more ridiculous than him shaving his actual beard. You've turned this into an absurdity.
But the funny thing is, that is a real possibility. That is Moses's cultural heritage. So, either way, though, I think we can confidently say we believe that Moses did, in fact, have a beard.
Okay.
Is that correct?
I think so. I think so.
All right.
Wow.
Then this one may be a bit of a sacred cow for you, but the next one is I'm curious what you think. Will there be coffee in heaven?
Okay. Yes. I not only love coffee, but I live in a area of the country that loves coffee. So this is kind of a sacred cow for me. But honestly, where my brain went first is, of course, because God's chosen people were literally called Hebrews. Like, yeah, I mean, he was trying to tell us something, I think. Like, yes, there's going to be coffee in heaven. But then I also think about, what was the tree of life that God forbade Adam and Eve from eating from? And then in Revelation, we get this scene where we're going to get to eat from the tree of life. What could be more of a tree of life than coffee beans? So yes, yeah, there's going to be coffee in heaven. I'm certain of it.
Oh man, I have two immediate reactions to this. First of all, I am not a coffee drinker.
Well, it doesn't matter. You're not going to heaven. It doesn't matter.
No, I see. This is where I think this becomes a gatekeeping situation in which God is going to bring profound reconciliation from the various groups of people on earth. In this case, those who drink coffee and those who do not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can go to Ephesians and document that. But I gotta say, if coffee in heaven means there's two ways people drink coffee, right? There are the people who drink coffee because they need the caffeine and they would do better with an IV.
Yeah.
And there are the people who like savor coffee. It is like made brilliantly and it tastes amazing and it is just beautifully made. And I got to say, as somebody who loves coffee but doesn't respond well to caffeine. So I can't like drink gobs and gobs of coffee. I would love if heaven was a place where the art of coffee was the focus, because I would love a great cup of coffee once in a while.
Mm.
Right? Like
See,
just a,
yeah.
ooh, that was amazing kind of cup of coffee.
So you're saying the Pacific Northwest is literally heaven on earth.
No, I think the rate, well, no. So this is where 90% of the things in life, Pacific Northwest and the Northeast where I grew up, can be lumped in the same general category. This may be the place where they differ, because I'm fairly sure if there was a way to like more authentically mainline caffeine, the entire Northeast would just go for that and abandon coffee immediately. Because the point is to have enough caffeine to run at the insane pace of the new Northeast.
Okay.
And I
Yep.
tend to read that into urban contexts, like where you live, and coastal contexts, like where you live. But I think I'm wrong. I think that there is the stereotype is that there's a little bit more of a laid back culture. Is that right?
Oh yeah, it's far more laid back than the Northeast, and the experience of coffee. There's a lot of coffee snobs out here, and so it's not just like having coffee. It's like, how did you prepare your coffee? And there's like 50 different ways to prepare your coffee, and everybody has their opinion. Everything from French press to drip to, just like instant coffee, which everybody shuns, to like, there's all these specialty little things that you can do. And, is it espresso? Is it regular coffee? Whatever. Yeah, people take it very, very seriously. So it's the delicacy, it's the art of it and the taste of it, the experience of it that is really celebrated out here. It's not just about mainlining caffeine.
Yeah, see, that sounds great to me. If that's what we're going for, I am for coffee in heaven, because I look forward to savoring good and beautiful things.
Hmm. Yes, well said.
But if we're on the whole idea of the future life, I got to throw out another one that I just have very specific thoughts about. And that is, will we need sunscreen in the new creation?
Okay, I'm curious about your very specific thoughts here.
Okay, well, so here's again, as I make an art of overthinking things here. I thought to myself, okay, well, the only sun in the new creation is theoretically God himself. And so it is the glory of God that is lighting the whole world in the new creation, which means, will I need something? Because the glory of God is so powerful that it is causing potential harm to me, that it is, burning something in me. And I thought to myself, yeah, that sounds about right.
So you need God
So,
screen?
yes, I think you might need God screen PM.
TM.
Trademark. Yes, we're trademarking.
Okay. Well, one, I think that sounds more heretical than you mean it, because like literally God's causing harm by his actual presence. That doesn't seem to compute.
Maybe we should call it purifying. It's a
Oh.
refining fire.
You can't dig out now, buddy. No, I'm going to go back to my Northwest roots and say, no, we're not going to need sunscreen in heaven. And that's why I live in the Pacific Northwest, is I'm practicing living without the sun. I'm living a sunscreen-free life now in anticipation of my heavenly life.
So we won't need sunscreen because we won't have the sun, because it'll just be murky all the time. That's your picture of heaven.
Okay. Murky is your definition of what I experience. I prefer
Sorry, let me rephrase that. Drab.
drab. Okay. I prefer liquid sunshine. That is what we have out here. It's just lots and lots
Oh,
of liquid sunshine. And honestly, it is like kind of this protective layer of like moisture so that the sun doesn't get too bright, the UV rays don't penetrate. Like it is a very safe and sheltered way to live.
that is what Christians always think of people who live out in the Northwest. They're so sheltered. Um, that's the stereotype. We need to just get you out more. But
Well, that
all
might be
right,
true.
so I'm coming down on yes on sunscreen, and you're coming down on no on light for
No,
uh, the new creation.
I guess so. I guess so.
Okay. All right, let's reel it back in and focus in a little bit on the present day realities of life. Um, this is something people deal with all the time, and so I figure we should really wrestle with it before the situation comes up. And so I want to ask, what's the minimum number of people required for a church split?
Oh, dang. We were having fun and now you're talking about church splits. Well, yeah, okay. It depends on the size of the church. Like I don't think this is a fair question because if you're a church plant and you have like 20 people in your church and 4 of them leave, that feels like a church split. But if 4 people leave from like Second Baptist Church in Houston, like nobody even blinks an eye. So I think it should be like a percentage, like what percentage of your church has to leave in order to call it a church split?
Okay. Well, all right. I have thoughts, but let's let's hear your thought on a percentage then. What's the percentage?
I think 20%. And I'm going to go back to that, like, 4 people leave from a congregation of 20. That feels like a church split. So yeah, I'd say 20%.
Okay. So really it sounds like what you're saying is a noticeable percentage, which 20%. Okay. All right. I have two major thoughts on this one. Because, again, I think the thing we have to do is come back to the biblical data on questions like this.
Wait,
Um,
I don't even know of a church split in the Bible. Where are you going?
well, first of all, there was when Abraham was overseeing a church split, and he said to God, "Well, if there's 50 people, does that count?" And God said, "Sure." And then he said, "Well, but what about if there's less than that? What if there's only 45?" And God said, "Sure." And I think Abraham got God in conversation all the way down to uh, 15 people leaving counted, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe even 10.
Wait a minute. This was not a church split. This was whether or not the city was going to get destroyed. I mean, we've taken a church split and made something even bigger out of it. The destruction of a whole population.
I'm just saying that it's the closest analogy we have in the Old Testament, so we have to apply it.
We have to apply it. Context is no longer king.
Correct. So, but in the era of grace, in the New Testament, I think that Jesus sets a new bar. He says, when 2 or 3 are gathered, there am I in their name. So if 2 or 3 people leave one church and start their own.
You just went all straight heresy on that one because you misquoted that. You said, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there am I in their name. Like, talk about church split language. Like, oh yeah, if I got 2 or 3, then I've got Jesus. Then that's all that matters. Jesus is gathering in my name.
See that? It works. So I think the New Testament gets us down to if 2 or 3 people leave, it counts as a church split.
Wow, you are a terrible exegete.
So you're going with 20% and I'm going with 2 to 3 people. Is that correct?
I guess so. And by your own definition, you have overseen a lot of church splits.
Well, that is that makes me more confident I'm right. Yeah, I've got some stories there, but I'm not sure that they're podcast appropriate. So let's move on to a different one.
Okay.
Let's move on to safer ground here.
Hey, you brought it up.
No, these are the burning theological questions that are central to who we are as a podcast that we have to answer. It's not that I want to. It's that for us to be consistent with our mission as a podcast, we must.
Okay.
And we are simply having the courage to do so.
I will do it in the name of the podcast.
All right, there we go. Keep it up. So, all right, here's again. We'll kind of move off the dangerous ground, and I just want to know: does God hear prayers better when your eyes are closed?
No. I mean, that's absurd. But I will say, if you're a dude and you wear a baseball cap, God ain't listening to a word you have to say.
Oh, that is clearly true. I mean, particularly probably Mariners caps, but
dang.
I'm just proud that I could remember the name of the team. That is how much I follow baseball. I started the joke and was like, I'm not 100% sure I actually know the name of the team.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Which may be more of an insult than the joke itself.
It really is. It's like, what am I doing here? Friends for over 20 years. You can't. Wow. This is like such a deep part of me that you're like, I can't even remember the name.
Oh, but back to praying. I just have to tell you, when I envision this, there are two things that come to mind here. The first is all of the people who have told me over the years that the most private space that they can get in their day is in their car.
Okay.
And I wonder what would happen to the world if they all closed their eyes when they were praying.
Ouch.
They would be quickly closer to Jesus. Let's say that much.
Well, isn't there that famous song, Jesus Take the Wheel? Isn't that what that's referring to?
See that? Yeah, it must be. I hadn't thought about that. Yes, it's somebody who is so, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him. Yeah. So,
and he will make your car straight.
Yes, he will make your, yeah. So you just close your eyes and pray. You don't even have to stay in the driver's seat if you have kind of a car in which you can shift over to the passenger seat and give Jesus space. That's great. I think that's wonderful. I also wondered, there are times when I'm trying to pay attention and I close my eyes to focus sometimes. Do you ever do this? Do you ever close your eyes just to kind of really focus on what somebody's saying?
Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I just wondered if maybe God hears prayers better if he closes his eyes.
Oh, so God's supposed to close his eyes, not us.
I'm just curious,
well,
sometimes when some of the bad things in the world happen, maybe what actually happened was God was listening to somebody else praying. And so, he missed something.
Ouch. Well, and boy, you have really bought in hard then on the evangelical definition of prayer, which is us talking to God, because he's doing the listening. So he has to close his eyes.
Well, clearly I'm the important and informed person in the relationship.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're going to title this Heresy. That's just the title of this episode.
Yep. But in a good way.
That's the even better title. Heresy, but in a good way.
Oh, man. But okay. Serious question. Well, semi-serious. A little. It's got some seriousness to it.
This is so highly qualified.
Right. I'm just curious. In our social media era, if Jesus had come today, would the Sermon on the Mount have gone viral?
Not a chance. I mean, we barely read the Sermon on the Mount out of our Bibles because it's so dang challenging. It's not as though Jesus had something that really tickles the ears there, but I would say, like, how would it become viral? Probably if like people started taking it literally, or like other things happened as a result of people listening to the Sermon on the Mount. So like, the Morton Salt Company is suing followers of the way for trademark infringement, or there's a rash of people gouging out their eyes, and it's all because Jesus told them to. And, that would go viral.
The eye gouge challenge. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Like the ice bucket challenge. Oh, dang.
The right hand challenge.
Yeah. Or a different, this is a plank challenge. Like, how big of a plank can you produce out of your eye? Yeah.
Well, so I'm wondering, I have one thought, which is, on some level, given the technology that they had at the time, it did go viral. It became the most published printed work of all time, or part of it, right?
Wait, you're actually arguing that it did? That was one of the most...
I think on some level, the Gospels, which include the Sermon on the Mount, did kind of go viral, right? I mean, it was just slow viral. Sliral. I think it went sliral. Yeah. But, and here's my proof. So, do you ever watch reels, which are like little clips of things?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So preachers often try to clip their sermons and provide these little reels. And then you see like the black highlighted white text of the words that they're saying in that one little bit that they're showing on the reel. Right.
Yeah.
So I think what would have happened is that clips would have, or in fact did, go viral. And they're just, they're the parts that everybody wants to hear. So Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And what does everybody hear? Blessed are the poor. So that's what Luke writes down. He was capturing the viral message that everybody was excited about. That's what I think happened.
Wow.
The kind of warm, fuzzy bits. We'll ignore the rest of Luke's Sermon on the Mount that is wildly not warm, fuzzy bits. But but seriously, I do think that's what would have happened, right? The blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That would have gone viral in one of those little clips or shorts or whatever they're called. But Turn the Other Cheek definitely would know. If you'd have quizzed people on whether that was in the Sermon on the Mount, they'd have been like, "Oh, no way, that's the blessed are the poor speech."
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that's what would have happened.
You might have a point. I just think the whole thing was super challenging. I think in his own day and in today, that doesn't have the viral sense to it that, Charlie bit my finger seems to have.
That's true. That's true. So maybe not. Maybe the Sermon on the Mount does not go viral. But if we're thinking about the Bible and we're thinking about what it would be like today, here's my next question. Okay. Would Paul have used emojis?
Oh, man. Huh. I think it would depend. I'm not a huge emoji fan. I'm sure everybody's very shocked by this. And Paul knew 3 languages, and he was so smart and learned. I think he was a fan of words. I think he would have not known what to do with emojis. But would scribes have inserted emojis as they went along? Like, as they're transcribing Paul's words, would they have just thrown an emoji in there? That's an interesting thing, because there's lots of times where Paul's, clearly expressing an emotion. I do think about the poop emoji, and think it would be a perfect substitute for the word scubala, where Paul says, like, I consider all these things rubbish in comparison to knowing Christ. Like, he's using this word trash or crap or something like that. It would be a great moment to just throw the poop emoji in to really express what he's trying to say. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, see, so that's one spot. And then the other spot that I was thinking of was, in Romans 6, where Paul says, shall I go on sinning that grace may increase? The next thing he says, may it never be. That feels like it has far more emotional content than logical content. Like, I feel like that is beautifully translated by the head blowing up emoji that like communicates like you're blowing my mind by even asking the question.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, well, I feel like that's what Paul is saying there. So I actually think that might work.
Well, and I kind of think the double red exclamation emoji, like he would have used that 1,000 times. Right? Like that one, he really wants to hammer his point sometimes. Like when he says like, oh, all those Judaizers, I wish they would just go the whole way and emasculate themselves. I bet he just would have thrown those exclamation points right there at the end. Just like, ah, or the angry face or something.
If Paul was on a word processor, that would have been bold underscore, like italicized, all caps, in bright red, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Don't miss this. Not that he was intense at all, but whew. All right. I got a couple more. If you got some more theological energy in you.
Oh man, we're solving the world's problems one question at a time. So bring it on.
All right. Sticking with our theme of what would happen if it were happening today. If Jesus came today, would he drive a hybrid?
Wait a minute. So you're asking me if a carpenter from the countryside would drive a hybrid?
Well, when you say it like that.
I mean, yeah, exactly. No, he's driving a pickup or a 4-wheel drive for sure. It's not like, even in the course of his ministry, I mean, how many times did he actually make the big old trip down to Jerusalem? He was around Galilee. He was in and out of boats. He was a carpenter. Like, he needed something to tow. He needed to get around country roads. Like, no way is he driving a Prius.
No, I think I'm going to land on agreeing with you here. If I envision Jesus traveling today, if he's in a city, he's taking public transportation 100%. Right? Like, okay.
Yeah, sure. He wants to be with the people. Yeah. Okay. All right.
He's taking the bus. He's taking the subway. He's taking whatever. So he's not using the Prius, when he's in Chicago. He's certainly not using the Prius when he's in like Fellowsville, Oklahoma or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think you're right there. And I think long distances, somehow I imagine Jesus being able to take like 12 steps and get from like Chicago to Houston. What? It would be some modern version of, in my mind, walking on water. He was just going from A to B in the most convenient way possible. And in that era, people were like, well, you can't walk on water.
Oh my gosh.
In our era, we'd be like, well, clearly that's an 8-hour or 20,000 hour walk. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It took me 20 minutes.
So this is so funny. Like, I don't know, because what you're describing is so absurd to me that my brain just went to absurd levels with it. I'm picturing, do you remember like the old Super Mario where like the little Mario would hit a box and out would pop a mushroom and and he would like become bigger? Yeah. And so like then Jesus is bigger and he could like take a couple of steps and then he could arrive and then it wears off, or like he gets hit by a turtle shell or something and then like boom, he's back down to little Jesus.
There was some country song like this, like years and years ago. What was it? It was called 8,000 Pound Jesus or something like that.
What? Oh, I don't know anything about this.
It was something like that. I don't remember. I'm sure I've got the number wrong, but it was like the whole idea was Jesus is really big. And so maybe he took really long steps. I don't know. Maybe that's what put that in my head. But so you are voting for a beater Chevy truck, and I am voting for public transportation.
Yes. Yes. And I am deeply aware of my rural context and your city dwelling context as we talk about that.
I could not agree with you more. Clearly, we are inviting Jesus into our own context, right? But on some level, I think that's exactly what we're supposed to do.
Sure.
All right. One more. I want to know what biblical miracle would have been the best party trick.
Oh. Well, okay. So I think two things come to mind right away. One is water into wine. He would have made him the most
this
popular.
Was my first thought too.
Yeah, right. Like he's being invited to every party. But then I think in terms of like a party trick, spitting in the dirt and making a guy be able to see is pretty dang cool. Like I think that would travel. That would travel well. I think you could do that every pop.
Travel. Oh man. So I've got two, I think, that come to mind for me, or maybe three. First of all, if we're talking about a kids event, a lot of times you'll see like petting zoos and things, and the talking donkey, I think, could be a real hit on the petting zoo circuit.
Wait a minute, that's Old Testament. That's not a Jesus miracle.
Oh, I didn't say Jesus. I said what biblical miracle?
What? Oh, I thought you said
what biblical miracle? Or at least that's what I have written down. Maybe I, being a good evangelical like I am, I assumed that Old Testament didn't matter. Or maybe being a good evangelical like you are, you assumed that, despite what I said. One of us.
You know what? If only this were recorded, we could find out whether or not you said Jesus. Oh, I was only thinking Jesus.
Let us know. Well, in your defense, several of the previous ones, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus and a Prius, were just Jesus focused. But this one, so you can change your answer. What biblical miracle would have been the best party trick?
I've already given my answer. I can't. My head is already just focused on Jesus. So please enlighten me with Old Testament things.
All right. So first of all, I'm going Balaam's donkey, like I said.
Okay.
That would make a great addition to the petting zoo circuit. If I'm going Jesus, feeding the 5,000 has to go up there, right? Like,
yeah.
Being able to stop at a convenience store, grab a tube of Pringles and, some marshmallows, and Jesus makes it enough to feed like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at this like killer event, and it's super good, like barbecue or something. I think that is a marketable skill.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think there's that one. But then the one, I don't know if this counts or not, but there is some serious pop and sizzle in creation. So, I mean, if you could gather a bunch of people like in a field somewhere, and Jesus just says, all right, everybody look up. It's night. It's getting dark. And he just speaks galaxies into existence.
Oh, dang.
That'd be pretty cool.
That would be very cool. Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of the restaurant at the end of the universe in the Hitchhikers
That is
series.
Exactly what I started thinking about as I was talking. Yes.
Oh, right. Nice.
Yeah. That must have been in my head somewhere.
Yeah.
But
wow.
Yeah, so.
Well, I think we have solved the theological issues of our day.
I think we can call it good and not even continue the podcast. I think we're done.
Right. And this is the end of On the Phone with Josh.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, okay, so this is clearly not the end of On the Phone with Josh because we enjoy doing this way too much. And quite honestly, we enjoy hearing from our audience way too much. So to our audience, thank you for putting up with this lunacy today. And if you have other theological convictions that you need to weigh in on, please, by all means, hit us up on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Threads. Let us know these burning questions, such as, was Paul the original hippie? All the real important stuff. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks for following along with us.
Yes. Theological conundra are our middle name.
Sure. Well, we have engaged in so much nonsense today that I don't think thoughts would even be appropriate at this point. We should just skip right on to the Witch Josh because it fits the theme of our podcast.
Right. So, all right, let's do that.
Okay. All right. Well, this week's Witch Josh question is, which Josh had to intercede for his shed?
And this is me, and it was literally today. That is the first thing I did today. Because, prayer is the first thing you're supposed to do when you get up. And so, but this is true. I actually got a notice from the city about 3 months ago telling me that this shed that I have in my backyard nobody had ever pulled a permit for it when it was put in. And so I needed to either take the shed down or get a permit. So, I'm just going to do whatever I'm told to do. So I went, I applied for a permit. And I said, oh, sorry, we can't give you a permit for that because it's in the wrong place. Like, what do you mean? Oh, it's too close to the edge of your property. I said, it's a shed. Okay. I didn't realize there were that many rules for sheds. But so I said, okay, what do I need? You need a variance. My shed needed a variance. And so I had to go today to a meeting of the city planning committee in order to ask them for permission to keep my shed. So wow. In between, like the thing before me, the guy's like wanting to build this like huge, giant freestanding garage on his property that is big enough to fit his giant trailer and his truck without having to disconnect them. And the person after me is like wanting to build 3 or 4 new buildings on this big piece of property. And there I am saying, hi, I'd just like to keep my 8x12 shed. How are you?
Please tell me in the context of all of that, they did not turn you down.
No, it was great. So one of the wonderful things about living in Missouri is that people genuinely are nice. And so without our request, my neighbors actually showed up at the hearing to say, this is dumb. The shed is like closer to our property than anybody else's. Let them keep their stupid shed. And literally there is no place else on my property I could put it. We have the lateral lines from our sewage system take up the rest of our property in the back of our yard. And so it literally couldn't go anywhere else. And it's illegal to put it on top of lateral lines. Yeah. So they basically said, yeah, this is pretty easy. We'll just let you keep your shed. Have a good day. So I successfully interceded for my shed today.
Wow.
Amen.
Amen. We really are solving the world's problems on this episode.
Yep, one shed at a time.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on keeping your 8x10 shed.
Yeah, 8x12.
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to cut off a couple feet.
Yeah. Oh. Well, the thing that's ironic, the reason I have to correct you is because if it was only 8x11, it would have actually been too small and it wouldn't have qualified for all of, I wouldn't have had to do any of this work. It just happened to be 6 square feet too large. And so it falls into a different category that required all this work to be done.
What if you just promised not to use the other 6 square feet? I'll just keep it blank.
Yeah, I don't. It was weird. But anyway, my shed is fine. So stop digging on my shed.
Okay. Congratulations.
Anyway, so regardless of the life of sheds or Paul being a hippie, are we on to talk next week?
Hipster. Didn't we say hipster?
You said hippie when you said it on the podcast.
Oh. I'm not listening to anything. Okay. Let's talk next week. I'll turn my ears on.
All right. I'll talk to you then.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye.